right, hello everybody. How is everyone today? Hope you are having a wonderful day today. Hopefully you are not in the same rainy situation as I am today. Hopefully you guys are having lots of sun and beautiful weather. But since today we're having a little rain, we're going to do a little bit of a watercolor design, and we're going to bloom some beautiful roses for the summer here. So I am just going to go ahead and pull my chat up here, and then we will get started in just a second. And all right, let's go ahead and pull that chat up. All right. Let's see who is with us today. Look at all of those familiar names in there. Crystal Copeland, thank you for always being here. I see all of your comments and they are always wonderful. So thank you, thank you. Thank you for everybody else being here today. We appreciate you guys. And hopefully you are ready for a beautiful watercolor design, a beautiful blooming rose design. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I did clip down my nail shorter here, and I was actually using, if you saw that first couple of seconds of our live stream here, I was using one of our new toenail clippers. And this is an absolutely fantastic toenail clipper. We actually have the 2-pack with the toenail clipper and the fingernail clipper in there. So if you guys haven't seen these on the website yet, you are missing out. So make sure to check those out on there. They're super sharp, and they're going to be a great tool for you for clipping either your nails, your toenails, or your trainer hand nails. But either way, they are going to be an excellent tool for you. So let's go ahead and get started. And today we're going to be working with our full cover stiletto tips. And you can see we've got all kinds of great sizes and shapes on there. So we're going to be using those. I am going to, actually let me move one more thing around here, get a little bit better angle for you guys. All right, I think I'm going to turn my fan off. That was creating a little bit of noise in the background, so turn that off. All right. So let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to start by pushing back the cuticles. And normally you guys see me using the magic wand to push back the cuticles, but I do want to show you one of our other new tools. This is our glass cuticle pusher, and comes in a cute little pouch like that. But it is a beautiful cuticle pusher. It works amazing up around those cuticles for pushing back, cleaning up all of that excess protein growth. So whether you're using the glass cuticle pusher or the magic wand, just make sure you go through, get those cuticles pushed back, get all that dead skin cleaned off, up around that cuticle, down along those side walls. Make sure to get that all cleaned up. Now, I am going to put my tool back into the little pouch, but you guys, if you are working on yourself or you're working on a client, real person with these, I would definitely wash and disinfect these before you put them away again. But because I'm just using this and showing you guys this on my trainer hand, that can go back into the little pouch. So nice little carry case for it. All right, so once we push back the cuticles, I'm going to size out my tips. And I always size out before I go through the rest of the prep and filing and all of that. That way I don't get all of the extra dust from prepping my tips onto our already prepped nail. So we're going to set that hand aside, and we're going to size out our tips. Now, I know that on my trainer hand, my tips tend to be around a size 2 or so, but I do want to show you how I would go about sizing these out. So I like to start by just kind of taking a look at that nail. Now let me come in a little closer here. So I'll take a look at the nail, and I'll actually look first of all down the C-curve of the nail. So kind of down the barrel of the nail. So you want to check what that C-curve looks like, and you're going to compare the C-curve of the nail. Actually, let me scooch this off to the side here. There we go. So you're going to compare the C-curve of the nail to the C-curve of your tip. So I'm going to grab one of our tips. This is a size 1. And I'm going to turn that around, and I'm going to compare the well of my tip and the C-curve of my tip to the C-curve of my natural nail. Now this tip definitely looks a little on the large side. So let's go to another size down. Let's go to a size 2. So let's take a look at that. Now I think our size 2 is looking about right. So if we take another look here nice and close, right in, that looks about right. So once you have that C-curve that you think is going to fit properly, Then you're going to check that nail and check that tip on the nail, and you're going to check from sidewall to sidewall. So what I mean by sidewall to sidewall, actually, I'm just going to grab my little brush here real quick. So from sidewall to sidewall, that means the edge from this edge of the nail all the way to this edge of the nail. So I want to check and make sure that the tip is going to fit from that edge to that edge without either hanging off too much or being too narrow. So if it's hanging off too much, I actually think this tip is going to fit just right. So let me show you one that would be hanging off too much. So if I go back to that larger size, that size 1, do you see how much that hangs off the edges? That's going to be way too big. Now, could we customize this and file off those edges and make it fit? Yes, we definitely could. And sometimes you might need to do that. Sometimes you might need to take off those edges a little bit. We might customize our tip here just a little bit. But on the opposite end, I'm going to grab a tip that's way too small so you can see the difference there too. So this one definitely does not fit the C curve. It's if I really press down, I can get that, I can get that tip to set down on there, but it really fans out and it really puts a lot of pressure on the well of this tip. And we don't want to be putting that much pressure on there. We want the tip to sit on the nail nice and easily without having to press down. Because what can happen is if you press that tip down and you have to put a lot of pressure on that nail when you're adhering it, it's going to have a tendency to want to pop back up. So when you are either wearing the nails or even sometimes as you're filing the nails, if you really squish that tip down on there, what can happen is that can pop back up and then you're going to basically have to start all over again. So you want to make sure that you're not having to put a lot of pressure on there, but then it's also not hanging off the sides too much. Now, with that said, today we're going to be using our tip and jewel adhesive to adhere the tips. This is a very thick gel. So this is what we're going to use to adhere the tips on. When we're using a product this thick, we actually want to kind of compensate for that thickness. So when we size our tip, we want it to hang off the edges just ever so slightly. So this one, this was our size 2. If we take a look at this one, you can see it's just barely hanging off the edge. If I was going to be using maybe just a regular resin glue, brush-on glue, something like that, I would size it so it fit here. But because we're using the tip and jewel adhesive, I want it just a little bit bigger, so that way that adhesive is going to fill in a little bit of space underneath, and we're not going to end up with our tip too short on the side. Okay, so it's almost like you oversize the tip when you're working with the tip and jewel adhesive just to make sure you've got a little bit of extra room for that product underneath. Now, this is the tip that I am going to use. I like how this one's fitting. It's hanging off just ever so slightly on those edges to compensate, but it is a little bit square right here in the corners. So if I were to put that right up into that cuticle area, that tip is going to hang off the edge here just a little bit. So if that happens, I am going to customize the tip. Now let me put these other ones away here real quick, because I don't want to be filing with my box of tips open. I don't want to get any dust in there. So if we do need to customize and taper in that tip at all, I like to use my 180 sponge buffer. It's actually a file buffer combo. So it's got a file on one side and then on the other side it's a buffer. So this way I only have to worry about grabbing one tool. I don't have to grab my file and then grab my buffer because we're actually going to use both sides. So I'm going to taper in those corners just a little bit. So this way it's going to fit right up into that cuticle area without anything hanging off. And it's also going to look more like an actual enhancement rather than a press-on nail. Because we don't want our nails to look like press-ons. We want them to actually fill in that cuticle area. We don't want it overlapping. We don't want it overlapping onto the skin. So that's why I'm just customizing this a little bit, rounding out those corners a little bit right through here so that that tip isn't hanging off the edge. Oh, Vibe Nail Lounge, I miss you too. Good. I'm so happy you're here. Thanks for joining us. All right, so just going back and shaping up that cuticle area just a little bit. Now here's the reason that I like to use the combo file buffer, because after you do your filing, you're going to have a little bit of a frayed edge. You can kind of see right up through here, there's a little bit of that frayed edge. If I push that up, that's where my buffer is going to come in. I'm just going to take the buffer, come right up around there, and that's going to take off that little bit of a frayed edge and give me a nice smooth edge and a nice smooth little finish on there. So this way, if we hold that on there, that's going to look like it fits right up into that cuticle area. Again, just that tiny little bit of an edge hanging off, and that's going to be about the right size. Now, you guys, I want you to notice something. I'm not sizing this out with the tip exactly at that cuticle area. I like to leave just a tiny little bit of space, so this way, once the tip is on, I can actually blend that in, and that way I'm not going to have a ridge or anything that's going to catch at that back area. It's just going to grow out nice and flush to that natural nail. Okay. Yes, you guys, we are doing stilettos today. Somebody's asking, what is the length of the false nail? These are our stiletto tips. And if you aren't quite familiar with us, we are Young Nails. Everything that I'm going to be using today is from Young Nails. You can find it on our website, youngnails.com. But these are the full cover stiletto nail tips that we're going to be using today. And yes, we are going to keep them long. We are going to keep them fun and festive and just nice long nails for the summer. All right, so we've got our nail sized out, ready to go. Let's go ahead and finish the prep on our nail. So we've already pushed back our cuticles. We did that step before we sized out our tip. Now I'm going to go through and remove the shine. And I've got an older sanding band on here. This one is what I used. Actually, I used it on these other 3 nails. Now, could I probably use it on this one because it's the same set? Yes. But I like to show you guys that I always recommend changing out your sanding band for every new service, whether it's on you, whether it's on a client, whether it's on your trainer hands. Always make sure for every new set that you're doing, you always start with a fresh sanding band. And this is going to help to do the proper filing without a lot of effort. And it's going to have the proper grit to give the proper texture and to do the work that it needs to do. So always make sure, change out, get a brand new sanding band so you're not using a dull one. And also, it's going to be nice and clean and sanitary. Sanding bands you cannot sanitize and disinfect, so that's why you would always want to make sure you're starting with a new one for every client. All right. What we're going to do is just gently prep the nail surface. So I'm going to work right up around my cuticle area, just in short little strokes, short motions all the way around that cuticle area. And then I'm going to feather in almost a diagonal motion. So from this corner back to this corner is where I'm going to be working, okay? I'm not keeping my bit on the nail and grinding all the way through. I'm just feathering. So it's almost like if I slow this down, slow the motion down, I'm coming across, picking up my bit, across, pick up my bit, across, pick up my bit. And the reason for that is to help avoid any heat or overfiling. If I were to keep my bit on the nail and just grind away at that, that's going to get really hot and it's actually going to cause some damage. So just those little short feathering motions are just enough to create a slight texture, break up the surface oils in that nail, and give you the proper adhesion. All right, let me grab my manicure brush and we're going to dust off that nail. Get as much of that dust off there as possible, even underneath if you need to come underneath there. And then we're going to cleanse the nail. Now I'm going to use my swipe. And those of you that were with us yesterday, I still have not refilled my swipe bottle. I know I need to. I'll probably do that this afternoon if I remember. But we're just going to take a little bit of that swipe onto our manicure brush. Just pump a little bit of that onto your manicure brush. And we're going to use the swipe to cleanse this nail. And this is going to help to remove any of those last tiny little bits of dust that maybe we didn't get with that first brushing. It's also going to help remove any surface oils from that nail or any germs or bacteria. So that way we're going to end up with a nice clean, dry nail. It's going to have the proper texture and it's going to have the proper pH level to bond to the rest of our products that we're using. Now let me come in nice and close. Actually, I'm going to show you this one more time. Do you see how after scrubbing with that swipe, the nail plate is a little bit damp? It's got a little bit of that swipe on there. But as we let that nail set, it's going to start to go back to that chalky dry look, which is exactly what we want. Okay, we want a nice clean dry surface. If you still see any last little bits of moisture on the nail, give it just a little bit longer to dry. If we go into our next step of our bonder, which is protein bond, if we put protein bond on that nail that still has swipe on it, swipe is basically going to null and void that protein bond, and you're not going to have the best adhesion that you could. So we're going to go now into our protein bond. And somebody's asking, what dehydrators and primers do you use? I don't like to call it a dehydrator because we really don't want to dehydrate the nail. All we really need to do is cleanse the surface of the nail. Excuse me. And that's where our swipe comes in. So swipe, like I was saying, is going to clean off all of the dust, all of the oils, and everything on the surface of the nail. And no, somebody's asking, can we just use alcohol? No, I don't recommend just using alcohol because straight alcohol can still leave a little bit of a residue on that nail, which can inhibit your product from adhering. So I recommend always using that swipe. Make sure to use that for that clean, dry, pH balanced surface. And then we don't actually use a primer. What we use instead is a bonder, and that's our protein bond. So protein bond is a non-acid bonder, so it doesn't have any of the methacrylic acid that a lot of other primers do. And how this works is just basically like a double-sided tape. So I am going to tap off a little bit of that protein bond into the bottle. I don't want to flood this onto the nail. I'm going to start by brushing from the center out to the sides, and then I'm going to work back towards the cuticle. Now the reason that I do this is because a couple of things. I want to make sure I'm not flooding that product into the cuticle or onto those sidewalls because like I was saying, it works like a double-sided tape, or if you think about it like an anchor. So wherever you get your protein bond, that's where it's going to pull your product to. So if you flood this into that cuticle area up there, it's going to pull your acrylic, your gel, your glue up into that area, and we don't want that. We also want to make sure that we're starting in the center and working out to the sides so that we don't flood that product onto the skin. Whatever product you're working with, whether it's a traditional acid primer or the protein bond or your glues or anything, you want to make sure that you're keeping product off the skin so that you don't have issues down the line with allergic reactions and things like that. So all of these products can be used safely, but you also have to make sure that they're staying off the skin. They're not designed to adhere to the skin, okay? Now, one more use for our protein bond that we're going to do today, we're going to work with our full cover tip that we've already prepped and got that all ready to go, but we're going to be using, like I was showing you before, our Tip and Jewel Adhesive Gel. Now, gels do not like to stick to a shiny surface, and that's exactly what we've got here. We've got a smooth, shiny surface. And if we were to just put our adhesive in there, it's probably going to pop right off because it's not going to stick to that shiny surface. So you could do one of two things. You could use your electric file. You could go through and you could turn this on to about 5,000 RPMs and rough up or give a little bit of texture to the well of that tip. Otherwise, what I like to do instead is use my protein bond, and I'm going to apply just a nice even coat all the way through the well, everywhere that my tip is going to adhere to that nail. So all the way through. That's going to give a really sticky surface. You can almost see it. It looks kind of wavery. Wavery, is that the right word? Wavy? It looks kind of wavy. So that way you can see that it's adhering to that shine. And now our protein bond is going to help our tip really adhere to our adhesive. All right, so we've got our tip ready to go. We've got our nail prepped and ready to go. Let's go ahead and apply it. So two other things that I'm going to grab here. I've got my dual-ended brush and spatula. And this has a spatula on one end, which is what we're going to use to pick up our adhesive. And then on the other end, it has a little brush. Sometimes I like to use the brush. I don't always use it, but sometimes I like to use that if I need to clean up any of my adhesive around the edge of the nail. So I love this tool because, again, just like my dual-sided or my combo file buffer, it's 2 tools in one, so I don't have to worry about too many different odds and ends on my table. So we've got that, and I'm also gonna grab let me see if I can show you here. This is our Touch Cure Light. Let me get this into camera here so you guys can see. So this is our Touch Cure Light. It's got a little stand. You can adjust the stand. But this is what we're going to use to set or freeze our gel into place so that the nails adhere, and then we'll get it into the full UV light that I've got back here. Now, this one, because it's a Touch Cure Light, we're going to turn that on, and then you can tap the end of it to turn it off and on, so it's nice and easy while you're working and applying those full cover tips. All right, are we ready? You guys let me know in the chat. Throw some hearts into the chat if you are ready to see the actual application. And we'll go ahead and get onto it. All right, so again, we've got our tip and jewel adhesive and my spatula. So I'm gonna scoop out just a little bit of our tip and jewel adhesive and kind of just tap off those little strings there. All right, looks like you guys are all ready here. You're ready for the application. So I'm going to take that little bit of our tip and jewel adhesive. Now I see a lot of people, they just will scrape it off at that back edge, and you can do that as well. But I actually like to start by just pressing that down into the well as far down as what is going to cover that nail. Okay, so just pressing that right down in there, and actually I think I'm going to grab just a little bit more. I want just a little bit more in the well here. Not too much, but just a tiny little bit. So just pressing that into the well, I'm going to use some pressure, bring that all the way back to the back edge of our cuticle area here. And then I'm going to start bringing that out to the edges. Now, I don't bring that product all the way to the edge. I don't know if you can see this or not, but there's a little bit of space right through that edge. I leave a little bit of space so that when I do put this tip on, some of that gel is going to squeeze out to the edges. And I want to make sure it's not squeezing off the edge. So when I put the tip on, that product is going to make its way all the way up into this little edge here, and it's going to cover the whole thing. But I just leave that little bit of space for a little bit of movement. Now I've got a little more gel on my spatula here. That I will scrape off the back just to make sure that I've got enough of that adhesive in the well. Now, I'm going to show you this from the side view, and then I will show you the actual application, but I want you guys to see how I angle the tip onto the nail. So when I'm putting the tip on, I don't just set it flat down onto the nail. A lot of times what happens if you just press that down there flat, you're going to get air pockets underneath. So what I do instead is I'll start at a downward angle. I'll connect that cuticle area, and then I'll rock the rest of that tip down onto the nail, and that's going to press out all of those air pockets underneath there, and we're going to get a really good application. Now another thing, I'm going to show you this from the front view. When I put that tip on, like I was talking about earlier, I don't just put that right at that edge of the nail. I leave just a tiny little bit of a gap. And when I set that nail down, I'm going to set it down and I'm going to slide it back just a little bit. So that way, if any of that gel does squeeze out the back end, it's not going to come in contact with that cuticle, and it's actually going to come back up underneath the well of that tip. So let's go ahead and do this. Actually, I already touched that onto the nail, but I want to make sure that I've got my, my Touch Cure Light right in the area that I need it here. You guys can see, let me readjust here just a little bit. All right, so again, we're gonna start by setting that tip onto the nail. So set that down, connect that right at that cuticle area there, okay? Slide that back just a little bit so it keeps all of the gel underneath, and then we're gonna rock it down. Now I want you guys to watch right through here. You're gonna start to see, like it is here, the gel is gonna connect it's going to connect that nail to the tip, and it's going to press out those little air pockets. So we're going to use a little bit of pressure. You don't have to work super fast, but you want to be accurate. So just pressing out all of those air pockets, connecting that tip to the nail. Now, if you do start to see that back edge lift up at all, kind of lessen up on your pressure, but you can also put a little bit more pressure in that back area if you need to. So a little bit more pressure, little more pressure. I can start to just barely see that back edge lift up, so I'm going to put a little more pressure in the back area. And I think we are good. I'm going to check my tip, make sure it's nice and straight. I'm just going to gently hold the tip there, and I'm going to turn on that touch cure light, and I'm going to freeze this nail into place. Now, we're not going to fully cure this tip with our touch cure light. We're just going to freeze this into place. So let me come out just a little bit so you can see. So all we're doing is just setting this tip into place. So if we were going to be doing a full set, I would do one nail at a time like this, freeze it into place for maybe 20 to 30 seconds or so. And then I would tap that, turn that off. I would adhere my second tip, turn on my light, freeze that into place. Do my third one, freeze that into place. Do my fourth one, freeze that into place. Do my thumb, freeze that into place. Then, after you have all of those tips set into place, then you're going to go into the full UV LED light, and you're going to cure that for a full 60 seconds. Now, we want to make sure that we are fully curing that, but it's going to be nice and easy. Oops, my light didn't turn on there. There we go. Because when we did freeze that with the touch cure light, it just basically set that tip into place so it's not going to move, and that way we can get all of the nails into the full UV LED light at once. We don't have to do one nail at a time and try to get that into the light. Okay. Which gel is she using to cure the nail tip? You guys, the gel that I'm using is our Tip and Jewel adhesive. This works absolutely amazing for adhering your full cover tips. You can use it for adhering your quarter well tips, and it also works great for jewels. So jewels, rhinestones, all of that great stuff, you can use the Tip and Jewel adhesive to adhere those really well. All right, as I am getting set for our next step, you guys make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can keep getting all of this amazing education. That is curing. So after we cure that, it is going to have maybe just a little bit of a ledge right in the back area. Let me show you that real quick. All right, let me come in nice and close here. So right in that back area, there's just a little bit of a ledge with that tip. Now we want to make sure that we don't leave that ledge, because that's going to be something that our client is probably going to pick at. I know I would pick at that if I had that on my nails. So we want to taper that down a little bit, and we're also going to just kind of clean up the nail, maybe soften up that point on the end. Sometimes there's a little tab of plastic that's on the ends of those. So we're going to go through, check our shape, make sure that there's nothing hanging off the edges. Looks like we're pretty good on our sides here, but just checking those edges, making sure everything is clean. And then we'll take the electric file, same sanding band that we were using earlier, and we'll turn that on to about 5,000 RPMs. And I'm going to just work right up over that plastic. So I'm not actually touching that natural nail. I'm staying on the plastic tip, and we're going to just bevel that down. So thin that out so it tapers all the way down until it's flush down to that natural nail. Now again, you guys, just like when we were doing our prep, I'm using short little strokes all the way around. I don't want to try to grind all the way around like that, okay? That's again going to create heat and discomfort on your client. So just work in those short little strokes, just enough to thin and taper out that back cuticle area. Now you guys, I do want to show you something that you can do before you put your tips on. I don't always show you this because it's not something that I tend to do a lot of, just because I like to be able to see the gel underneath. But if you want to, you can take your file and you can pre-blend that back cuticle area, and you can kind of taper that a little bit, thin that back area out, so that way when you do put this on, you're not going to have that thick of a tip. And you guys, these tips aren't very thick to begin with, but that tiny little bit of blending or pre-blending will help you if you don't want to do as much blending with the electric file once the tip is on. Now, the reason that I don't tend to do a lot of pre-blending is because sometimes now that I've blended that out, I might not be able to see that gel underneath, as I'm setting that down and rocking that on. So for me, I like to do my blending afterwards, but if you prefer to blend beforehand, you can definitely do that as well. So lots of options for you guys. Use what works best for you. And now that we've got that cuticle area blended, nice and flush down there, there's no ledge anymore, I'm going to go through and I'm going to prep, just like we prepped that natural nail. I'm going to go through and prep and remove that shine so that when we do our gel polish application, everything is going to adhere really well. Remember how I was saying that gel does not like to stick to a smooth, shiny surface? Well, right now, same thing. When we do our gel polish application, it's not going to adhere very well. Oh, sorry guys, a little off camera. But your gel polish does not want to stick to that smooth, shiny surface, so we need to go through and create a little bit of texture. Just like that. All right, let's go ahead and dust that nail off one more time. Dust out underneath. Now, before, when we were cleansing the natural nail, we were using Swipe to cleanse. So the Swipe was that blue liquid. Swipe does have a little bit of acetone to it. If we were to use Swipe to cleanse our plastic tip now, that acetone is actually going to smooth out that surface again. We don't want that smooth surface. We want that texture to it. So instead, at this point, we're going to switch to our ManiQ Cleanser. ManiQ Cleanser is now what we're going to use to clean this nail off and get rid of that extra dust that might still be on there. So just a quick little cleanse through there. And if you need to, any dust that's underneath there. And we are going to be good to go. Okay, so we're going to go back in with one more coat of our protein bond. You guys, you use protein bond for so many different things. I always say, when in doubt, add protein bond. The only time I'll tell you don't use protein bond is if you're working with just a brush-on glue. Brush-on glue and protein bond, those are the only two things that really aren't friends, but for other enhancements, acrylics, hard gels, gel polishes, all of those different things, fiber gel, tip and jewel adhesive, all of those things are going to work really well with the protein bond. So when in doubt, add protein bond. All right, now for our design, you guys can see we did a little bit of a watercolor here, but to get that kind of a layered look, we're actually going to start with a coat of our ManiQ White 101. And I've got to find that here. So just our white gel polish. And this is what's going to help to give those colors a lot of brightness. Now, I'll show you the colors that we're going to be using here in just a second, but I want to get my white on here, and then we'll get that curing in the light. And then I'll show you the other colors that we're going to use. Now, when I do my polish, especially on longer nails, I always start by polishing out my free edge first. And a couple of reasons for that is because I like to make sure I'm capping my edges all the way through here, all the way around the side, and then right at the end. Now, as I cap my free edge here, do you see how it gets a little bit of extra buildup of that polish at the end? This is why I cap my edge, and then I go back through and I'll blend all the way through that. That way it's going to clean up that little, it's not really a bubble, but the extra gel that's on the end. And then I'll go back into the rest of the nail. And just like my protein bond, I start in the center and I work back towards that cuticle area. I'm going to put a little pressure on my brush so it fans out my brush. Do you guys see? I'm not shaky just yet anyways, but I am just wiggling that brush. So it's just fanning out that brush, and then I'm going to push that back to my cuticle area, and then I'll sweep that down the sides and all the way through the end. And again, this is going to help to keep that product from puddling down at the point, down at my free edge, all the way through, and then blending all the way through. Now you guys, the old school thought or the old school myth of you have to polish in 3 strokes is it's not valid when you're working with gel polish. You can go over that nail as many times as you need to get that product nice and thin and nice and smooth. Now, if you're working with an air dry polish, then you might have to work a little bit quicker, but not with a gel polish. You've got all the time that you need to work with that. Now I'm going to grab a few of my other colors here. I'll show you guys what we're going to be working with. So that first coat of my gel polish is curing for at least 30 seconds. And I think I had my timer set for 60. So we'll go ahead and do one more coat, and then I'll show you all of the different colors that I'm going to use. Now, if you only want to do one coat of the white, you can probably get away with that. With our design, it's going to look watercolored, and if we have just a little bit of that shadow underneath there, you're really not going to notice that. But if you want that really perfect white application, go ahead and do a second coat. So same thing, I start at my free edge, brush out those edges, brush all the way down to the end. I'm going to grab a little bit more color. I think my bottle is getting a little low here. Need to restock that one. Working all the way back to my cuticle area. And you guys, I'm going to show you one little trick here in just a second. You can kind of see right up into that little corner area. I'm not able to get my brush all the way right around there. So if you're having a hard time getting right up into that little corner, oh, it looks like I got a little edge right down there. I want to make sure to cover too. If you are having a hard time getting right up into that little area up there, I'm just going to grab my tile. This is a little ceramic tile. You can get that at your local hardware store, nothing fancy. I'm going to take a little bit of my gel polish, put that onto my tile, and I'm going to grab my micro detailer brush. Now I do want to make sure this is clean. I had a little bit of that black gel polish in there before. But I'm going to take a little bit of that white polish with my micro detailer brush. I'm going to come in so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Take a little bit of that right up into that cuticle area. So this is going to help you get those cuticle areas nice and tight and nice and smooth. All right, I think we're good there. Just another tiny little touch up over here. Okay, we're gonna go back into the light. And again, we're gonna freeze that for at least 30 seconds on there. Gotta set my timer on that again. Okay, so we're gonna set our white 101 off to the side. The other colors that I'm gonna be using today are, let me see which ones I got. So the colors that I'm going to be using on our nail today are Fickle Pickle and Frog Opera. But on the other nails, I've also been using Sleep Under and Whatever You Like. That's the name of it, not Whatever You Like, but you guys know. So those are a couple of the other colors that I'm going to be using today. I'm also going to be using my, let's see, this is Look Don't Touch. This is a black gel polish. You guys, you can use, if you prefer, you can use the ManiQ Black 101. Let me find mine here real quick. I just grabbed the Look Don't Touch, the one step. You could use the Black 101 as well. Either one is just fine. But that's the one that I had handy and easy. We're also going to be using our ManiQ Top Coat, our ManiQ Base Coat, and we're also going to be using one of our gel paints that is Overdrive. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to actually create the bottom layer of our roses. So you can kind of see through here, you can see how that color, that black, is just faded out. That's where our blooming gel comes into play. Now, you guys, we're not actually using a blooming gel. Normally when I do designs where I like to work as, a blooming gel where something is going to spread or move, I use my stain resistant top coat. It works amazing to allow that product to just kind of flow. But for today, I don't want it to flow as much. So I'm going to use my ManiQ Base Gel instead. So personal preference, whichever one you want to use. You can use the stain resistant, you can use your ManiQ Base Coat. Totally up to you today. So we're going to start with a thin coat of our base, and we're just going to polish that all the way through the nail. Just a nice thin coat. You don't want this too thick because you don't want it to, you don't want that flower or that design to bloom super fast. The more product you have on here, the faster that design is going to bloom. Now, I got ahead of myself here, you guys. Grab your black, and we're going to put a little bit of that onto our mixing tile, just like we did the white. And you really don't need a ton of it, so just a little dabble do ya. And again, we've got our micro detailer brush, this teeny tiny little brush, and we're going to start with just a tiny little bit. So a tiny little bit on our brush, just a little dab in there. And I even, a lot of times you guys can see, I use my nail as a little, kind of an extra palette. So I'm going to dab out just a little bit of that extra paint onto my nail. Yeah, maybe just a little bit more here. Okay. And I think we're going to start with, we'll try to do three roses here for you guys today. I do have a couple of nails that have 3 and then one that has 2. You guys do as many hearts as you want to, or flowers as you want to do. So we're going to do 3 here today. So we're going to start in our top right corner. I'm going to dot that right down and just kind of make a little comma. Take a little bit more, and we're just going to do little lines right around the edge here. Right around here, pulling that through. And you guys, those of you that get a little shaky, like I do sometimes, oops, sorry you guys, you can't even see what I'm doing. If you get a little shaky from time to time, that's okay. This actually is a great design for you because you don't have to create perfectly straight lines. Okay, so we've got the outline of our rose. I'm going to come down to down here. We'll do another rose down here. Just tiny little lines, pulling those, and you can pull from both directions to give a little bit more texture. Now, you're seeing that as I'm working, that black is starting to bloom out. It's starting to blend. You kind of have to keep an eye on it. I don't want it to blend too much, but I do want it to bloom out just a little bit. So I think right now, I'm liking how my roses are looking. I'm gonna just freeze these into place, again, using that Touch Cure light, because I want these to just set. I don't necessarily need to, I don't need to completely cure them at this point, but I do want to set them. So this way they're not going to continue to bloom. They're not going to continue to move. Yes, you guys, I'm sorry. I know I was out of camera for a second there. Hopefully I wasn't out for too long and you got to see, but I will do another rose here if you missed that. So now at this point, let me come back in here. I've got my 2 roses on the outside. I need to do a 3rd one in the center, but we've already cured our base. And again, you guys, this time I'm using ManiQ Base. I know you guys usually see me use the stain resistant top coat, but when I was trying this design, the stain resistant was making my flowers bloom too fast. So that's why I switched to the ManiQ Base. This time it's going to help to keep it, it's still going to bloom, but it's not going to bloom as fast. So just another option for you. But again, my base coat is now cured. So I am going to add a 2nd coat of base coat. And again, just a very thin coat. And even if you needed to, you could have just done the base coat right through that center area. So let's go ahead and, let me come into camera here. There you go. So we're going to take a little bit more of that black. I'm going to dab that off, and we'll just start right in the center here. Make your little comma or your little C shape, and just tiny little edges all the way around. So tiny little lines all the way around. I think I need just a little bit more there. And like I said, you guys, add a little wiggle, add a little texture to that line. And if you guys are, like I said, if you get the little shaky shakes at all, that's okay. That's actually great for this design. It adds dimension, it adds texture. I think we're gonna do not quite so much, maybe one more little line here. And I think I like how that's looking. So just that watercolor, just that really fade out. We're gonna freeze that into place one more time here, and then I will get this back into the light. Now again, you guys, I'm just freezing this into place, setting that product so it doesn't continue to bloom, and then we will give it a little bit more of a full cure in the light, okay? All right, so just a few seconds in there to stop. I'm gonna get this back into the light now, and then we're gonna go in there for, I'm gonna put that in there for 60 seconds, but it only really needs to go in there for at least 30, just enough to set everything into place. So while that is in the light, I'm gonna show you the colors that I'm gonna be using. So like I said, I've got Fickle Pickle and Frog Opera, And then I also had, on the other nails that I did, we've got Sleep Under and Whatever You Like. Now these are all sheer colors. So these are, when you polish them on, oops, you guys, let me bring my camera out just a little bit. So when you polish these ones on, you're going to be able to see through them. So you could have done these underneath your flowers, but I actually feel like you get a little bit more dimension if you do the sheer colors over your flowers. So we're not really doing like a dimensional sculpted nail, but by layering these in, you're going to get a little bit more of that dimensional look. So we got Fickle Pickle, which is kind of it's almost a limey green. And then Frog Opera is kind of almost a tealy green. So those are the ones that we're going to be using. But you can see those are our 4 different colors that we have in the shears. All right, so that is cured out. We're going to go ahead and do a blend. So just like we've got on our last nail down here. Let's come in nice and close so you can see. Again, we've got our roses on there. And they really are, you guys, they're a watercolor kind of a look, so they are faded out. We're going to go through and we're going to outline and give a little bit more detail in just a second here, but we're going to add in our color first. So again, to get those layers, to get that dimension. So I think I'm going to start with Fickle Pickle. And again, you guys, this is another reason that I have the tile here, and I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to start with Fickle Pickle, and we're going to just polish this on one side of the nail. So just all the way down one side of the nail. We're going to take our second color, and if I can open that up, you guys make sure to hit that subscribe button while I'm opening my polish here. All right, there we go. And we'll go through the second side, brushing that down, and then I'm going to come right through the center. So it almost blends those two together. We don't have to worry about it being completely perfectly blended. If you have a little bit of a darker area and then a lighter area, it's actually going to look really cool as kind of that watercolor look. Now, I'm going to use my tile. I'm actually going to wipe out my brush on that tile because when I brushed over that more kind of that limey color, the brush did pick up a little bit of that. So I want to make sure that I'm cleaning that out of my brush. Now at this point, again, we're going to go back into the light and we're going to freeze that into place, at least for another 30 seconds. But you can kind of see a little bit of that limey green got picked up on my brush, so I did want to make sure that I clean that out onto my tile here. All right, again, you guys, while that is curing, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and then we are going to grab our gel paint. So this is Overdrive. This is our black from our Mission Control gel paints, and our gel paints are really, really highly pigmented. So as you're working, again, I've got my micro detailer brush here. These gel paints are so pigmented that you can do just teeny tiny little lines and you're still going to be able to see that color. So when we're outlining, we really want to be using just those tiny little bit of that tiny little bit of paint, just those tiny little lines. So as you're working, you can either work with your brush straight up and down, or sometimes I'll angle it just ever so slightly, but all you're using is just barely the point of that brush. You're not going to be putting a lot of pressure with that brush. We're not trying to really do line work. We're just trying to use just the point of the brush to barely create some lines on our nails here, okay? So just a little bit of our gel is what we're going to be using. And just like I was showing you before, I do like to use my nail as a little palette here. So now we're going to just kind of create some outlines. So got my nail palette here. I'm going to take out a little bit of that extra gel. So I just have a tiny little bit in there, maybe just a tiny little bit more, okay? All right, now at this point, you can kind of pick and choose where you do your outlines, but do you see how right through the center here, my rose is really kind of faded out? I want to create that, kind of that illusion of that rose actually being there. So we're gonna take just a little bit of this, and just like we were doing with that first application where it was bleeding or blooming out, we're just going to start with that little, kind of that little comma shape, and then we're going to create just little wavy lines almost at the edge. So actually, you guys, let me show you on this one down here. Right at the edge, do you see where the edge of this black area is? That's where we're going to draw in the line, just right at that edge there. And again, create a little motion with it, create a little bit of that waviness to it, okay? So that's where we're going to be creating that outline. So wherever you have those other petals, that's where we're going to be outlining. Okay, so just right through here and a little bit more. And you guys, a lot of times when I'm doing this kind of detail work, I tend to hold my breath and I tend to not be able to talk. So if I stop teaching, I apologize. It's just because my brain apparently can't do two things at once here when it's this detailed. But just keep outlining, keep a little bit of motion in those lines, and that is going to be your rose. And again, just creating that watercolor look. Now, because we're working on a cured surface, this does have the gel that we applied here does have a tacky surface, but it's not a smooth or shiny surface, and it's also not a surface that is going to bloom. So like underneath, when we were doing the black before, it's a different product, and this one is not going to move. When we're working with the gel paints, these are pretty set, so they are not going to flow, they're not going to move, they're not going to blend. They are going to stay that nice crisp outline. And still just going through outlining a couple more spots here, I think. And once you feel like you have the outline that you like, you can pop that into the light again. And I think I like that. What do you guys think? Throw some, do we have green hearts? Do we have a green heart emoji? Throw some green hearts, or just throw some hearts in the chat if you are liking the look of this watercolor rose. Okay, I think I like that. I actually think I want one more little line right up in here. Okay, I think I like that. So at this point, I'm going to freeze that into place one more time in the light. I am going to clean off my nail because apparently I didn't clean that off the last time and I cured that gel on there. And as long as you guys are throwing some green hearts in the chat, let's also go ahead and start the top coat chant in the chat. So those of you that are new to our channel, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, join our community, and then once you've done that, you can type into the chat, top coat, top coat, top coat, and I'm gonna find my top coat. So you could use your ManiQ Top Coat, you could use your Ultimate Finish, whichever one you want to work with. You could use your stain resistant. I've got my ManiQ Top Coat here today, so we're going to go ahead and use that. I think I had that in there at least 30 seconds. So we're going to go ahead and top coat with our ManiQ Top Coat. And this is going to give the nail a nice, beautiful, glossy, high shine. And you guys, a lot of times when I do hand-painted designs and things like that, a lot of times I will use my Ultimate Finish top coat because it's a little bit of a thicker top coat and it'll kind of settle down into the design a little bit more. But today, notice that I'm not using that. When I'm doing my designs with the Mission Control, a lot of times, especially when I'm doing this tiny of a line, a lot of times the Mission Control goes on very, very thin. So I don't have to worry about using a thicker top coat like the Ultimate Finish to fill in and kind of cover up that texture. So that's why we're using the ManiQ Top Coat today. I love this because it does go on nice and thin. And also because we did a couple of extra coats. So we did coats of our color, we did coats of our white. I wanted to use a top coat that was a little bit thinner today so my nail didn't look quite so bulky. So that was one of the reasons that I used that. Now, keep in mind, if you are using the ManiQ Top Coat, it is going to cure with a tacky finish. You guys always see me use the Ultimate Finish that dries tack free. This time we do need to cleanse off the surface. So I'm going to use just one of our lint-free wipes, take a little bit of that ManiQ cleanser, and we are going to cleanse off that tacky finish. And I will show you guys our lovely Blooming Rose watercolor design. And like I said, you can try all of our different colors of sheer gels for your beautiful watercolor designs. And you've got all of those different color options. Create your beautiful roses. I'm gonna come there, see if I can get it a little, oh, that was maybe a little too close there. All right, you guys, how about we'll go with that. There you go. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, join our community, keep getting free education, keep joining us, and have lots of fun with nails. Make sure to set your notifications so you always know when we do go live, and we will see you guys back next time. Thanks, everybody.